Serious. Women of Reddit who were proposed to by their so and said no. What's your story? He brought me up to his apartment about a 2-hour drive from my college. I was basically trapped there. He asked me while he was feeling insecure about the relationship and figured a proposal would lock me in place. I dodged it for a few days, but I needed to get back to classes and he wouldn't take me back till I said yes. I figured he was a bright guy and would come to his senses eventually. He got me back to school. Eventually he realized that coercion is not a good proposal strategy. Sold my great-grandmom's wedding set to buy a gaudy diamond monstrosity of a ring. I had asked him to use the engagement ring to propose with, as I would have been the 4th generation to wear it. He said it was ugly and awful and wouldn't have his woman wearing second-hand garbage. I dumped his ass and got the set back from the pawn shop. Just realized this was the second time I dumped a guy based on this kind of behavior. I sure can pick him. I had an ex-boyfriend that I hadn't even seen or spoken to in 3 months show up to my parents' house at 3 a.m. My stepmom would stay up to all hours of the night watching TV, so she saw his car lights when he pulled into the side driveway. She came and got me furious. He was there and asked why I lied about breaking up with him. I had to explain we were broken up and I had no idea why he was there. When I went outside, he was leaning on his car looking love-struck and crazy. He told me that the universe wanted us together and it was cosmic fate. He then pulled out a frat boy bottle opener ring with a cat toy tied to it and told me he had an important question to ask me. I told him no flat out before he even asked. I pointed at his car and told him to go home. When he asked why, I listed all the things that led me to break up with him, including him dropping out of school multiple times and not having a job once during our 2-year relationship. He told me he did have a job now. When I asked where he worked, because I knew he was lying, he looked me in the eyes and said if he told me that he'd have to kill me. I had enough and told him to get the hell off my family's property, and he left reluctantly, telling me he'd be back. I never saw him again, but I heard through the grapevine that he told others that he had shown up in a tux with a huge diamond ring that I threw on the ground. I used to wonder what would have happened if my stepmom didn't see his car pull up. Sorry for typos. I'm on mobile. Oh my gosh, what a mess. I don't know why men lie like this. I once had a man leave his broken down car at my house for months. Apparently he thought I would pay to have it fixed, but I just held out until he finally paid to have it towed away. Later I learned he told people he had given me a vintage Land Rover in pristine condition with only 20,000 miles on it, but she was too stupid and too spoiled to appreciate it. No, asshole. You left your non-working POS hunk of metal with over 300k miles on it in my yard until you finally sold it for junk. Have not seen him since the tow truck came. Much to my relief. Edit, tow truck, not two truck smile. A few years back, I was dating this guy. At first, he seemed very kind, sweet and happy. Handsome too. I thought he was a great catch, especially as some toxic friends of mine were lowering my self-esteem. A few months after we started dating, he started changing. It was subtle at first. He would stop spending time with me and blaming me for it. Then came the gaslighting and manipulation. He started isolating me from my family, and hurting me when I refused to do things for him. Eventually, I got the strength to deal with the situation and tell him that we were over. To get me to stay, he hosted a large party with lots of friends and publicly asked me to marry him. I said number X asked me over lunch to marry him. He'd broken up with me about once a week for the last few months over nothing. He had serious emotional, mood issues that have now been diagnosed, but he was just a really difficult person to be around in general. I started laughing because it was just absolutely ridiculous. He asked why I was laughing and I brought up how he broke up with me every single week. He flat out said he wanted to get married because then he knew he wouldn't be able to leave. As if that stopped people from just getting a divorce. We broke up for good not long after this, but the whole thing was bananas. This is one for me. I have done this twice. We were dating for about 4 years. and we're in our early 20s. I felt unsure about our rest of life compatibility and suggested we needed to have some serious conversations to work out our plans moving forward after uni. All of these conversations made me increasingly sure we were incompatible. Surprise, surprise. They made him increasingly sure about the future and he wanted to get married. We were literally doing the deed under a lit Christmas tree at 3 a.m. and he asked me to marry him. I said we weren't ready. Bad plan. He still didn't have any idea what that would look like or how we would work out some fairly serious things around our location, jobs, etc. Eventually I got tired of saying no to a marriage I didn't think would work, and felt pushed and trapped. So I broke up with him. We remain friends. I was a bridesmaid in his wedding a couple of years ago. It was the right choice. 2. Only dating very briefly. He proposed in a restaurant, with a terrifyingly large ring, and provided me a PDF copy of his tax return so I could see he would be a good provider. Everything he did told me he hadn't really ever listened to me or got to know me properly. I said yes in the restaurant, to avoid causing embarrassment, and called it all off afterwards. He turned into an obsessive stalker and I had to get an avo in the end. We were both 18 and still in high school. It was around 10 months into our relationship. I broke up with him. I get an urgent call from him to please come over to my house. I need you. I was legitimately worried at this point. Went to his house. There was a dress on his bed and a note to meet him at the bay. At this point I'm just annoyed and didn't pick up on it. I drive to the bay and I walk up to him dressed in a suit. I'm so confused at this point. We sit down to talk and he goes into the speech and stands up to kneel. At that moment I realize what's up. I quickly stand with him and ask him to stop. I didn't want to ruin this moment for him forever. We just sat there and cried together. He thought that if he made a grand gesture that I would want to get back together. If anything, it showed me he would truly do. Say anything to get what he wants. It was heartbreaking all around. My ex was an abusive narcissist. I was 21, very naive, first relationship. He was 54 and divorced. I had been gaslit and pushed into the relationship but didn't realize that until later. He demanded keys to my apartment and passwords but refused to give me his and a whole list of crap like this. Now I wouldn't put up with it but at the time I did. He proposed at 11 months but by then he was verbally and emotionally abusive and had come close to hitting me. My sperm donor father was a very abusive alcoholic so I only have memories of his BS and I knew I didn't want to repeat the abuse cycle. My mom, grandma, and aunt have all had abusive husbands and I didn't want it to continue with me. Once ex-BF became abusive I warned him to knock that shit off or I'd leave. He proposed after calling me a stupid bitch. I followed through. I changed the locks in my apartment and my passwords. He actually called me after I changed my passwords screaming about it. I broke up with him. Why the hell is he trying to get into my stuff? After a few weeks of me refusing to go back to him he contacted my boss and accused me of stealing and contacted the fire department I volunteered with and accused me of endangering my team to showboat and get attention. Thankfully both believed me over him and he was blacklisted. He tried to show up several more times at FD events and he was always immediately escorted off property. I'm still glad I got rid of that all. I had a boyfriend cheat on me so many times. The breakup was hard, but then he got activated from the military reserves. I didn't meet anyone till 2 months before he came back. The whole time I wanted him back, but he and I weren't really officially together, and I knew he was talking to another girl the whole time he was gone. He came back, and saw the other girl first. He says to break up with her. You're right, and I realized I didn't like him. Thank God. He showed up at my apartment, saw me with my new boyfriend, and proposed in a crying fit. It was horrid. 3 months earlier and I'd have done it, but thank God for the timing of things. We had been together for about 4 years I think, and he just kinda popped it out of the blue, like we should get married style. So I was like, are you asking me? And he said yeah. So I said no lol. Basically we were both punky street kids and I just didn't want to get married. because marriage is just a contract OFC. So I rolled my eyes at him, but I was secretly very flattered. We stayed together pretty much for years, and he asked me a few more times over the course of that, and well, after about 10 years he finally wore me down and I said okay, I guess it doesn't matter. Which was as close as I think I was ever going to get to saying yes to anyone. Lol. He is definitely the only guy that could have worn me down like that. We are still together, 16 years since I first said number. Me and my wife are pretty anti-establishment and were against the whole legal marriage contract business until we realized that it would save us a bunch of money on taxes. There are real benefits tied to marriage that I didn't ever think of in my early 20s. Joint taxes, insurance sharing, hospital visitation rights, inheritance, etc. It wasn't very romantic rushing to the courthouse in late December to get married before the end of the tax year, but $3,000 is $3,000 and we're still together 12 years later. I was 19, and I was a mess. I'd recently been raped, and wasn't getting therapy. My father had been diagnosed as terminally ill with lung cancer. I was extremely depressed, and I was dating a guy I didn't like, because I was having trouble saying no to anything to do with sex or relationships since I just felt like trash after being raped. And then I got pregnant. The guy I was dating heavily pressured me into having sex without a condom just this once, and I didn't feel like I had the right to say no. I was feeling extremely guilty about the rape. I knew at once I wanted to abort. I couldn't take care of myself, let alone a baby. But the guy wanted the baby, and proposed to me. He had this dream that I would be his 1950s-style stay-at-home wife and he would go to work to provide for us. I offered to have the baby if he would look after it, but he refused that option. I said no. Of course, I had an abortion and have never regretted it. We broke up immediately. It's not exactly a fun story, but it's a real one. My mom said no to my dad the first time. He decided that he wanted to spend his life with her and wanted that to start ASAP. Still, they'd been dating less than a year and she was very nervous about rushing into things, even though they were madly in love. After a few days of continued discussion, she came around to his point of view, that is, if we're talking about starting a family, why bother postponing the legalities? So they got married 6 weeks later, and here we all are after 33 years. With them still madly in love. I said no the first time my ex-husband asked me to marry him because my mom legitimately cried when I said I thought he was going to propose. Like, your soul is breaking crying. She said he would make my life miserable and she didn't want me to experience that kind of heartbreak. I got married to him a few months later because I found out I was pregnant. Honestly, Mom was not wrong. Everything about our relationship sets of red flags. I was 21 and he was 27. We started dating when I was 16. He didn't like any of my friends, high school or college. He checked my text messages all the time. He had me move in with him so he could take care of me during my final stressful year of college, but I ended up doing all the housework, cooking, and cleaning. He made decent enough money but spent it all on luxuries for him, to the point where we were constantly broke. After we had my daughter, he insisted on moving away from my family to live in another city. I had no support and he was absolutely useless at helping with anything baby related. And then my dumbass stuck around for another 8 years. Honestly, should have bounced on the second proposal too. Fucking grats. We'd been together about a year at this point, and I'd made it clear to him that marriage was a big scary thing I wasn't ready for yet. About a month later, we went away for a weekend to one of our usual haunts. I was looking out the hotel window at something when he suddenly said my name. I turned around and he was stood there with the ring, and then asked me to marry him. I was so shocked and upset that he clearly didn't listen that I ran out into the street crying. I called my parents and one of my friends, all of whom were incredibly pissed off that he didn't respect my wishes, and wondered what the hell I was supposed to do. I eventually composed myself and went back into the hotel, but obviously we were both very upset. He said we could just break it off if it's too much, or we could stay together, and he'd promised not to mention marriage again. We took the second option. We did get married a couple of years later, but this was mainly because A, he was the least shitty partner I'd had at that point, and I did that dangerous thing of well he does A, but at least he doesn't do B and C. B, I was content, and thought happy was a daft Hollywood thing, and C, I thought I was being mature and grown up, and wanted to reward him for sort of looking after me when I'd been ill a few months prior. We got divorced about 5 years ago, and I realize now that not only were we very incompatible, but he was incredibly pushy and always found a way to get what he wanted. He told me later he had planned to propose in the restaurant, so thank Christ he didn't do that. I am sorry. I always feel like the hardest thing in a relationship is the grass is always greener kind of thing. Most of us fall in love with someone for Ziz and 4 years later, we got bored with Ziz and now we want ABC from our partner, and that's not who our partner is. My dad has been married 3 times and now his third and final marriage is also falling apart. I think in all 3 cases, my dad thought with his DCK and then justified the rest through drinking heavily and avoidance. Then one day when the sex ends you wake up and realize you aren't into this person for who they are at all, and while you thought you were in the beginning, I think both people in a relationship misrepresent who they are a bit to sort of sell themselves. Over time you see the real person and either bury it in booze like my dad, or divorce. Seeing the greener grass on the other side definitely makes it worse too. Thanks for your reply. I was literally breaking up with him because he was abusive, manipulative, and our life goals did not match up. I wanted to get married and maybe have children and he didn't. I had packed up most of my things while he was at work, and when he got home, we had the long-awaited conversation and he pulls out the Taco Bell hot sauce packet that said "Marry Me" on it. When I told him absolutely not, he then grabs the keys to his shotgun cable lock along with the ammo and hands them to me and says take this, cause I can't be trusted with it, implying he was going to kill himself. This was about 5 or 6 months after my dad had committed suicide. I was pregnant at the time, and he was being pressured by his family and friends to propose to me. We never really talked about marriage, but he was adamant. He proposed at a Gold Star Chili in front of the waitstaff and customers, with my mother's gold ring that she gave me years before that he took off my finger. As he was kneeling I whispered under my breath to get the hell up, but I kept up the facade until we were out of the restaurant. I told him it's not gonna happen, and why did he think that was a good idea? He had been cheating on me, and I was on the way out and everybody knew it, so this was like his last-ditch effort, I suppose. He then decided a month or so later to purchase a $1,500 ring with his grandma's money and give it to me on Christmas. I have no idea what he was thinking because I made it very clear I was only staying to try and save the relationship, and marriage was definitely not on the table at the time. I realized he was only in it for the comfort and not the responsibility. Hubby and I met when we were 23. I was getting out of an abusive relationship and he was getting out of an abusive marriage. Yep, I said hubby. My story's a bit different. Lol. After about a year of dating he started seriously talking marriage and I was kinda dragging my feet. Not BC I didn't love him. It was just so soon after both of our shitty relationships. Then, a couple months after the initial chat I end up pregnant. Things were good, and about 8 months in, a little over a month before I was due, he popped the question and I said number. I still had reservations and being pregnant didn't change that for me, it only made me worry more. But he understood. I kept the ring and wore it in a chain. We'd already lived together most of this time, and we started our family, as a couple but unmarried with a kid. When our daughter was 18 months old she was our flower girl at our backyard wedding. We've been together since '01, and we have a teenage son now too. So eventually I did say yes. Lol. We'd been together for 4 nearly blissful years, then went long distance for 1. A few months prior, when we were long distance, he cheated on me then dumped me for her. He came back, realized he's made a mistake, asked me to be with him again. I took him back for all the wrong reasons and things were never the same again. So when I went over to finally end it, hopefully on good terms, he pulled out a ring. It just fell flat. I told him it's all wrong. He said later that he realized the moment he did it, it was the wrong thing to do. He wanted me to keep the ring, which was non-traditional. It's been 20+ years and I still love him like a favorite childhood cousin, but I'm glad we never married. Second one happened the same day. While BF and I were broken up, I got with someone I had been ignoring an attraction toward for years. We had an intense little love affair while backpacking through America, but I realized he wasn't the one while he realized he wanted to marry me. We split up at the end of our trip and the wrong reason I got back with ex-BF was to keep myself from having sex with D. I would be faithful, and my attraction to him was dangerous otherwise. There were other, better reasons for getting back with ex, too, but this was a factor. After I broke up with ex that day, I went to a friend's house and D was there. He asked me to go for a walk with him and asked me to marry him. Spontaneously, seriously, said he couldn't imagine a life without me. I said no, we're just not right for each other. He laid on a massive guilt trip, which was another clue that I shouldn't be with him. I never saw him again after that.